welcome back to another Tinge of Ginge video. Now from the thumbnail you've already seen, we are going to be making a lure mould today. If you do follow me on Instagram, then you would have known I have already tried this out. I'm working with some clay that I haven't actually used before. I have done a little bit of clay modelling, but not a lot. And I wanted to basically have a little test of this just to see how this clay would actually react to being moulded and worked with. And from the beginning, I found it's quite easy to work with. It does start to set up very quickly, which is a bit of an issue. So a lot of the stuff I need to do, I'm going to try and get done as soon as possible. And I want to try and get a lot of the finish work done on it as well. I don't want to have to wait for this to set and then work on finishing it and making little details look a little bit nicer. I want to try and get it all done before it does set up, and that's because it is quite a fragile clay. I'm going to show you the clay I'm going to be using. It's quite cheap to buy. You don't have to fire it or anything like that. It's just air drying. But if I just show you what I did work on, you can see what happened. So I made it, and I thought, well, there's a few bits I want to change. So this was just a tester. I just wanted to see what would happen with this and how it would react. And yeah, it has snapped, and that was just due to me sort of carving down these sides and sanding it down just to try and make the shape a little bit better. So from that test, I've decided that I want to try and get as much of the finished work done as possible before I actually start messing about with this. So let me just quickly show you what I'm going to be using to actually make this. So this is basically everything I'm going to be using. I don't have a lot of experience working with clay, but this is just the basic stuff that I've got and that is going to work for me. So this is the clay I'm going to be using. It's just air drying clay. You leave it 24 hours and it does go hard. It's from Hobbycraft as well, so it's nice and cheap. It was easy to find, and this is probably going to be the best stuff for me because I don't want to mess about having to fire anything or treat it in any other way to make it go hard. I'm not too worried about it once I have made the actual part that I want to mould. So once I've made it, I'm not too worried about this breaking. As long as the actual silicone mould itself comes out fine, then I'm completely happy with that. I've got some little bag mesh here. So these are those little golden chocolate coins you can get. I'm going to use these for the scalp. I'm hoping I can get a nice scalp hand along the side. Just saves having to carve those scales in because I'm quite OCD and I want it to be perfect, so that's what I'm going to use for the scales. And then I've just got some of these toothpicks and I'm just going to use them for the finer details, just to carve in like the gills and the eyes and anything like that. As you can see, I've done there, I've sort of done a little bit of a gill there. I'm not too worried about too much detail on this. I will be doing a lot of finish work on it after I actually make the mould, so I'm going to be getting a few different types of colours and some glitters and things like that, just so I can actually make a bait that I find attractive. So this is what I'm going to use, and hopefully it's going to turn out all right. Okay, so the reason for me actually doing this is I do like my fishing. If you've watched some of my other videos, I have mentioned that I do like to go fishing. I predominantly go carp fishing, but I do like to go pike and perch fishing as well. And I'm not the best caster in the world. A lot of the places I fish are quite snaggy. I'm either casting underneath trees, or I'm going into weed beds, or there's other obstacles in the water that I can't see, and I do end up losing a lot of lures. And anyone that goes fishing does know that they aren't particularly cheap. Even if you do go out and buy the cheaper ones, I think for a pack of 6 at my local shop, I think they're about 12 to 15 pounds. So if you're spending that every single time and you're going out and you're losing 2 or 3 lures, it does start to rack up a bill. So I want to start making my own, because for the size of bait that I'm going to be making and the plastic that I'm going to buy, I could probably get about 100 baits out of this one mould. So hopefully I'll be able to make some stuff that actually looks nice to me. A lot of the stuff in the shops I look at, I'm not particularly happy with, and I don't want to spend that little bit more money on the stuff that does look half decent, because at the end of the day I know I'm going to lose it. I'm terrible at pike fishing, but I still like to give it a go. So that's the whole idea of me actually making my own lures and giving it a go and see how it turns out, just to try and save myself a little bit more money and just make stuff that I like the look of. In the future, if I do get half decent at it and some of the stuff I make does become half decent and you guys watching do like it, then maybe I'll start making baits in the future for people. I don't know, I might be able to do some custom orders here and there, but that's going to be way down the line. So like I said, today this is going to be the first time I'm doing this, so I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to start actually making this mould. So I'm going to be using a tile for this. I like tiles to use because they've got a very smooth surface, and when I did the actual previous bait test here, it hardly stuck to this. I literally gave it a little nudge and it popped loose. So I don't have to put anything on this like a release agent or anything, it will just pop off. And I probably will use this as well to pour the silicone onto. I'll just make a little box around the outside and that'll be used just to make sure that the mould does release quite easily. That's what I'm going to use to actually make the actual bait shape itself. Now instead of drying clay, it's quite a decent clay, it's quite squishy, it is quite manageable as well, easy to work, so it shouldn't be too hard to get the shape of one. I managed to do that last one in about 10-15 minutes, so hopefully this won't take that long. So I'm just going to break a piece off. And again, you can always add extra or you can always take away extra, so it's probably easier to take more away, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you can just use a little bit of water just to smooth out any rough edges, which we are going to do after we've made the actual mould. And all I'm going to do with this clay is I'm just going to work it in my hands just to try and make it a little bit more softer and malleable. And then once I feel like I've got it all mushed together, because I did stick a few extra pieces in here, just want to make sure it is all bonded and moulded together. So now what I want to do is, now it's here, I don't want to make a huge bait. Like I said, I like to fish with smaller baits. It's just, I feel that you get better takes on the smaller baits, gives the fish a chance to actually get that bait in its mouth. So what I'm going to do now, you can see I've got a rough sort of sausage shape there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start moulding down towards the tail end. So this is going to be the front end of the belly and the nose. And this end, I'm going to move all the material down and I'm going to turn this into the tail. Now I want this tail to have quite a lot of movement, so the type of plastic I'm going to use for actually making these moulds is going to be quite firm plastic. The reason for that is I'm going to make this tail section quite thin, and if I was to use a soft plastic then that probably would break off quite easily. So I'm going to use quite a firm plastic, and that will just enable me to make this area here quite thin, and then it will just give this tail a lot of wobble movement when it's coming through the water. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go through and you can see what I'm doing. I've made that basic shape of the actual bait that I want to make, and then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly work on it and get it to the actual shape that I want it to be. So you should be able to see I've got that general shape that I want. You can see I've got a nice belly on it. I've got that tail, kit tail. You can see I've got it curved on the tail as well. I've got this curve here, and I've done that just so it does trap water. And you can see I've got like quite a rounded end on the nose as well. And that's just because of the sort of shape that I want. If it is going through anything, I don't want anything that's pointed. I want it to be able to push through any weed or anything like that, any snags, and just move them out of the way. So that's the general type of shape that I've got for now. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and sort out these edges. So you can see these bits in here. You can see they're quite blocky. If you look from the front, you can see how much it sticks out. So what I'm going to do is now is taking a toothpick, I'm just going to go around those edges and I'm going to sort of chamfer them. So I'm going to come in with a toothpick and I'm going to take some of that material away just so I can make it a little bit more curved around, make it a little bit more natural looking. So I'm just going to come in and take my time with it, just taking away small parts of material each time I do it. The thing I like about the toothpicks is they're small, so you can actually get quite a lot of detail. I don't actually own any tools for clay work or anything like that. Like I said, I have done a bit in the past, but not a lot. I mean, you could make this from something else. I have had a go at this using wood. I think using wood is probably a lot better. It's a lot easier, but it can be a little bit more fiddly using wood if you haven't got the right tools available. So obviously with the wood as well, once it's treated, you can use that straight away. I think this takes a little bit longer. When I used the wood one, I did seal it using 5-minute epoxy, and that cured almost instantly, basically, because I was in quite a warm environment, so I didn't have to worry about that taking too long. I was going to use it to actually make a mould, but I wasn't entirely happy with the way it turned out, so I thought I'd give clay a go and I'll sort of compare the two and see what happens. But I think I've got a lot more confidence in the clay than I have in the wood. So you can see where I've taken that away, you can see there's like that little chamfered edge there, and all that's going to do is just going to round the bait off a little bit, just to give it a little bit more shape and just look a little bit more nicer. Also, it'll just give that towel a little bit more movement when it does go through the water. So I'm going to do that all the way around the edges, all the way around the front, and then once I've done that, I'm going to start work on this tail. So I've got that profile all whittled down on the sides. You can see it makes it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, looks a little bit more realistic. I'm going to go back in with some water in a minute just to make sure it is nice and smooth, but I feel like I've got the symmetry on the actual body of the bait quite nice. I've looked at it from most angles and I'm very happy actually the way it's turned out. It's not bad for my second attempt at making one of these, but I'm going to go over this once more. Don't forget we still need to put the scales on, and I do want to try and smooth this out as much as possible just so that there are no blemishes when it comes to the actual pouring of the plastic. So now I'm going to work on the tail end. So you can see the tail's quite thick at the back. So what I want to do is I want to try and take off as much of this excess material at the back as I can. I want this to be fairly thick just so that it can withstand any cast or any knocks, any debris that it might come across. But I want it to be strong enough that it is going to catch the water and it is going to wiggle from side to side and give me the movement I want. So again, I'm just going to be using a toothpick. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my time, I'm just going to slowly cut down with the toothpick to where I think it should be. I'm going to start off just by drawing a line, just as a rough guess of where I want it to go. Now from there, I'm just going to continuously go down the toothpick all the way to the base until I've actually removed that material. That's the thing I like about the clay, is if you do make a mistake, you can go back and change it. Whereas if you're working on wood, it is slightly harder. So with this, I'm just slowly taking my time, taking nice small passes through the clay, and you can see there it's starting to come away. I'm just going to work a little bit more on the other side, trying to keep it as even as possible. Then I can just break that piece of clay away just like that. There's a few little bits there, but I can clean that up in a second. So now you can see that tail area is still quite thick, but I'm going to work on it a little bit and move it around. So all I'm going to do is now I'm going to work on that area. I'm just going to make sure it stays nice and curved because I want it to catch as much of the water as possible. You can see there it's got a nice little arc in it. I'm going to try and keep that shape, and I'm just going to keep working it until it's nice and rounded and it's got the shape that I want. Now what I'm going to do is, you can see I've got quite a lot of this tail here. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to trim down these areas so they're not sticking out as much. I'm just going to use the same process I used before. So I'm just going to take my toothpick and I'm just going to slowly make small score marks, cut away that clay to where I want it to be. Then I'll just do that again on the same side, just to try and keep it as even as possible. So you can see there, they're pretty even. So now I'm just going to go around and make sure the edges are nice and smooth, and I'm just going to make sure there's no cracking, just make sure there's no other blemishes on that tail part as well. So I've got that tail basically I want it. Now I'm just going to do a little bit of finish work on the back of the tail. As you can see, there's some areas there that are quite jagged and bumpy, so I'm just going to smooth these areas out now, and then once that's done I'm going to move on to actually smoothing the whole thing over, adding some detail with the scales and the gills, and then hopefully that will be the end and I can just leave it to dry. So I've smoothed it out the best I can, just using the toothpick. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to take some water and I'm just going to use my finger using the water, and I'm just going to go over the entire surface of this just to try and take out any blemishes or any marks that I've made, and that should make it nice and smooth when I actually put the detail on. For this I'm just going to be using normal tap water. It'll have to be warm or cold, it doesn't really matter to be honest. All I'm literally using this for is just to smooth out the surfaces of this. So what I'm doing is just going to dip my finger in and being very gentle, I'm just going to rub that over the bait. Now you don't want to use too much water because the clay will start to break down a little bit and it will go a little bit mushy. You can see the top of that, it's going to be a little bit cloudy, and that's just from where the clay and the water mix. It just dissolves a bit of that clay and just makes a little surface over the top. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to smear that all over and that's just going to take out any blemishes, any marks I've left. If there's any cracks in the clay that have formed from me moving it about, then that's just going to actually smooth those cracks over and fill them a little bit. It's just going to give me a nicer finish overall. So I'm going to go over the whole bait, including the towel, and just trying to clean all the mistakes up that I have made. So when you are doing this, you just need to be careful that you don't push too hard. As you can see, I am moving that towel around slightly, but I'm not moving it enough that it is going to cause any problems. So I'm just going to try and get into all the areas, smooth everything off, and then once that's done, I'll move everything back to where it needs to be. Once this is dry, I probably will go over this with some sandpaper just to do some final finishing work, just to try and get it as perfect as I can. But I want to try and get as much of it done now, just to reduce the chance of actually breaking the mould itself. So you can see I'm just being very gentle. I'm just working those areas that I need to, just trying to smooth out any blemishes that are in there. You can see I've completely pushed that towel to the side, but it's not enough that it's going to cause any problems. I can just push that back in a second. So I'm just going to finish off smoothing everything out, and then we'll get back to you. And I'm just going to hold this mesh on the side and push it against the actual clay itself, and hopefully that should give me the actual pattern that I want for the scales. So I'm just going to lay it on its side like that. See, I've pushed that on there, and I'm just going to smush that into the side of the clay. Actually, this does feel a lot better. I've got a lot more confidence in this actually working. So you can see I'm just working my way along the bait. I'm trying not to move the mesh too much, and I'm just making sure I put soft pressure all over. Slowly peel that off. Now, I don't really care if there is too much detail. I just want the bait to have a little bit of texture. And yeah, that's come out quite well. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Don't know if you can see on the camera, but there is a slight pattern there. So I'm going to repeat that for the other side. Hopefully that comes out just as well. So I'm just going to push this up against the clay. Just gentle pressure. I'm just going to push along the mould. I'm not going to be pushing too hard on this other side along here, because I don't want to lose any of that pattern. But I'm going to be using a lot of glitter flake, and I'm going to be putting a lot of different colours into this. So this isn't really too important at this stage. I just want to test it out and give the bait a little bit of texture. I'm just going to slowly peel that off. Have a quick look. That side actually come out a lot better. Again, they're not super deep grooves, but it's just enough to give it that little bit of texture on the bait. But yeah, that actually came out really well. I'm quite happy with that. I think I might actually redo this side, just because my OCD is kicking in now and it's screaming that it's not the same. So I'm going to quickly redo this side. That's come out 10 times better. I will try and get a zoomed in shot of this for you to see, but I'm really happy with the way that's turned out. Really happy. Just got a little drill piece here. You can see it's got a little point on it. I think that's going to help when I do this. I'm just going to drill some eye sockets, just because I do plan on sticking some eyes on it, because I think as well, again, the eyes on a bait are a big feature, and I think again that's something that does attract those predator fish to actually bite. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the bait, take the drill, place it roughly where I want the eyes to be. I'm just going to gently turn the drill in my hand. Try not to take too much out, because I don't want it to tear around. So I'm just going to slowly take it out bit by bit. You can see it's just slowly removing the clay, and I'm not going to go too deep because I do want the eyes to stick out a little bit. So I'm just going to take that out. And you can see it's left me with a little socket there that I am able to stick the eye into. I'm just going to take one of my toothpicks and all that excess material around the edge, I'm just going to slowly scrape away and cut off, and try not to make any damage up here around that outside. I want to try and keep it as smooth as possible. And there is a little bit of a lip there that's pushed over. All I'm going to do is I'm going to push that down inside the bait, the eye socket, and I'm just going to smooth that out. At the end of the day, the eye is going to be stuck here, so the eye will hide any of those little mistakes that you've made. Again, the OCD is kicking in, it's not quite right, and a lot of the time I will keep playing with something until eventually I do ruin it. So sometimes, rather than keep going over and over and over and touching it up more and more, sometimes it's better just call it a day and just leave it, because that's probably as good as it is going to get. So I'm just going to do that on the other side now. Okay, so that's basically it. So now that I've done all that, I've tidied all the edges up, I'm happy with the placement of the actual mould. One last check I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that everything is dead straight, make sure the towel is in line with the body, because obviously it's going to, if it sets and it's off at a slight angle, it might swim a little bit funny. May add to the actual action of the lure, but I want to try and make it as symmetrical as possible just to make my OCD nice and happy. So I'm just checking, making sure it is dead straight, everything's where it should be, and yeah, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to leave this for 24 hours to set, and then once it has set, I'm going to pick up the camera and I'm going to show you the next step. So I'll probably be cleaning all of this up, and once it is once it has a nice finish, I'll then start making the actual plastic mould itself to go around it. So that's the end product. So I'm going to let this dry and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, so we're back and it's day 2, and this has had probably about 25-26 hours to cure now, so it is hard. Hopefully it comes off the toe in one piece. I'm just going to be really careful just to try and move it. Oh, and there you go, yeah, look, just a little bit of pressure and it pops loose. It's a good thing about using the tile, because it is so smooth, it is quite hard for this to grip hold of it once it is dry, so to be honest, this is an ideal platform to actually use. So now you can see it's gone hard, still got some of the detail in it, which is fine. And yes, now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up any of the rough edges and just try and make it look a little bit nicer. Just when I do actually pour the plastic for the mould, it's going to be a little bit more smooth, and hopefully the end result will be a lot nicer as well. So all I've got some rough sandpaper. This is 80 grit. I'm going to be using this first just to do the majority of the work. Then afterwards, I've just got some 600 grit afterwards, just to take out those score marks on the actual clay itself. So I'm just going to go over the body now quickly, do some work on that, and then I'll show you once I'm done. Okay, so I've got it to the stage where I've sanded all the sides down. I'm quite happy with the way the finish has gone. Smoothed off any other rough edges. There's a little few imperfections and a few little flaws on it, but I'm happy with the way it has turned out. Like I said, when the actual mould is put together and I start pouring the mould, hopefully a lot of them imperfections won't come out. But again, I think I can hide those just with actually the flake and the colours that are actually going to be put into this bait, so you won't actually see a great deal of it. But for the first attempt, I think this has turned out quite well. So the next thing I'm going to work on is actually making the little box to pour the plastic into, that's going to be the actual mould for the bait. So this is the tile that I was using originally. I've just cleaned it off, and I'm going to use this as the actual base for the silicone mould. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use cardboard and electrical tape just to make this over this actual box. So I'm going to place that in the middle. I'm not going to worry about gluing this down. Like I said, I'm not too worried about this. I don't think it will move, because once I actually pour this, it is going to be staying here. I'm not going to be touching it. So this is where it's going to be staying. So all I'm going to do is to make the sides, so I'm just going to take some cardboard, I'm going to cut them to the sort of size that I want, and then I'm just going to be using some electrical tape just to seal it in place, and hopefully it doesn't leak. Okay, so this is the box that I've made. It's not rocket science. I'm sure everyone's made a little box at some point. Literally just 4 pieces stuck together. And what I've done is I've just stuck this tape on the inside here, and that's just to cover that joint, just to make sure that none of the plastic can leak through that. Just to try and make it a little bit more watertight for when I do pour the plastic in. And so what I've done is I've made this just big enough to go over that mould. So you can see that I've made it just wide enough for the actual mould. I'm not going to be filling this up too much because I don't want to be using a lot of silicone plastic for this when you're not going to need it. It is just a waste. So I've made it just big enough so it gives me the edges I need, that's going to make it sturdy enough for when I actually do the main pours. So the next thing I need to do is I'm going to secure this box to the tile, and again I'm just going to use electrical tape because I know it's going to stick to the tile really well, and this stuff is going to hold the plastic in, hopefully not let it leak. So I'm going to be putting plastic along the inside all the way along, try and seal it, and I'm going to put a little extra layer around the outside as well, just to try and keep as much of that in because I don't want it to leak and go everywhere. So the silicone I'm going to be using for the mould is I think it's MB Fiberglass is the company I ordered it from. I just ordered this off Amazon, it weren't that expensive, and this is a litre of actual liquid, and it does come with a hardener that you need to add as well. Now the ratio for this is 10:1, so it's 10 parts of the silicone and 1 part of the actual hardener catalyst. So I'm going to do it by weight just because it's a lot easier to work out. So okay, so that's set at 0 grams. So I don't have a clue how much I'm going to need for this, so I am going to kind of wing it. The way I'm going to gauge it is I'm going to fill up this cup, and I'm going to try and guess how much of this cup's going to be needed to be filled for me to actually pour into the mould. Now I'm going to try and round it off just so that it makes it a little bit easier for me to try and work out the amounts. So here we go. I'm probably going to go for, I'm not sure, we'll see once we start pouring. I can always add a little bit more if I need to, but for now, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to do that. That's about 250 grams. And that's just the actual silicone part. Okay, so that's 1 to 10, so if that's 250, I'm going to 0 that. So now that's 250, so I'm going to add 25 grams of the catalyst. There you go, that's 25. And now I'm just going to give this a good thorough mix. I'm going to try and get that catalyst and the actual silicone well mixed together. I'm just using a little plastic stick here to mix it, and I'm going to try and mix that as thorough as I can before pouring it into the mould. So now that I've given that a good thorough mix, I'm just going to check my mould quickly is in the correct place I want it to be. Yep. Now there probably will be a few bubbles in this, but I don't have a vacuum chamber or anything like that to take the bubbles out of. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour this as slowly as I can, and I'm going to start off in the corner and just let the silicone work its way over itself. I think I guesstimated that pretty much perfectly. There's still a little bit left in the cup that I'm going to scrape out, but that was basically a perfect fill. I'm really happy with the way that's filled. So all I'm going to do is now is I'm just going to scrape the bottom and get the rest out. I'm going to call that good. So now we've poured that, it's just a case of leaving that again for 24 hours to set up. And once it's set up, hopefully we'll have a decent mould to show you. I've seen on the internet that you can actually use a heat gun, and you can blast the top of this area with a heat gun, and it does make the bubbles rise to the surface. I'm not going to do that because obviously I do have cardboard and I've got sticky plastic here. I don't want that to start burning and giving off fumes. So if you had a wooden mould, you could probably get away with it, but yeah, I'm just going to leave this as is, and hopefully that's going to turn out pretty decent. Okay, so it's day 3. I finally got this to set and it's gone rock solid. So now the bit I'm really excited about as I finally get to take all this off. So hopefully it's turned out right and it all comes out as I wanted. Right, so now it's time to actually take it away from the tile. There's a little bit of cardboard there, but I'm not bothered about it. There's a little bit of tape, that will come off as well. So yeah, now it's just time to actually separate this from the tile. So you can see there a little bit of the silicone mould did go underneath, but that's fine, I can trim that away with a pair of scissors. So now I'm just going to take this out. So there's one part of the actual mould that I've made. You can see it did snap off, but I'm not too worried about that. Now it's just a case of getting all those other bits out of the mould and then having a look on the inside to see how it turned out. From what I can see at the minute, I'm very happy with the eyes have come out. So let me get this other bit out and then I'll show you the actual inside of the mould. Okay, so now that I've got all that out of the mould, what I'm going to do now is all this flashing on the side. See, there's like a little lip there. I'm just going to go around with a pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut that lip off. I'm not going to cut too much off, but I want to cut off just enough so it does expose the whole mould. Okay, so there you go, I've cleaned up around the edges. You can see I've got a nice smooth edge now. I want to create a bit of a lip because hopefully when I do pour the plastic it will come up to a nice bevel at the top of the bait, so this won't be completely flat. But yeah, that's what I've come up with. You can see on the inside I've still got the scales there, the eyes are protruded quite well. I'm going to give this a little clean just to get any of the clay out, and yeah, I'm really happy the way that's turned out, and I think this mould is going to be able to do me quite well for the next few pour sessions. So that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed watching. I'm going to save the pouring for another video, just because this one is quite long. I don't want to keep it too long and having you to watch the whole thing of me being pretty boring basically. So yeah, I'm going to save this for the next video and hopefully we can get into pouring some decent bait. So hope you've enjoyed. Please subscribe and like to the channel and I'll see you in the next one. So this is the tile that I was using. Oh God, you can see my ugly mug again.